a fine tale for you, my friends. Hark not for them that call Hallowe'en a time of darkness. It was a time to honour the spirits, aye, but as much to honour the good as to fear the bad. A time to put on masks, to guise and jest, to dance around the fire and cock a snook at whatever dangers might leap deep in the coming darkness, before the nights got too cold and cruel for friends to meet and neighbours to laugh together, at least until the spring. We wore those masks and scary costumes not to honour monsters, but to mock them from a safe distance. We remember our community then, and sometimes the good and the bad can mix in the most peculiar ways. Before you ever set out onto the pretty waters of Loch Katrine, you'll spy a signpost on the riverbank. Direct you to Corn and Uriskin, the Cove of the Urisks. A pretty place. The guidebooks say it's charming, although if you ask me, charmed would be a more accurate description. It's a most singular spot, if you can find it, that is. If you can find two locals, natives of that lonely shore, who can agree as to where it may lie, you'll have performed a magic trick yourself. Some will say it lies at the foot of Benvenue, others that it's halfway up that muckle great mound. Some call it a cave, others a cove, some a little nook in the hill, easily overlooked by the feckless posies of the tourist trade, come to gaze at that spot. A place where the fairies lived, or so they say. A magical spot. And the signpost I mentioned, that won't help you at all. It only says that the spot lies near that marker. It doesn't tell you where. That's the thing with magical places. They don't easily accept definition. They might be one place, one moment, and another time. And they have many names. This spot is known as the Goblin's Cove, the Cove of the Satyrs, the Den of the Ghosts. But most locals will call it simply Corn and Uriskin, the Cave of the Urisks. And what is an Urisk, you might ask yourself? Well, if you talk to the greybeards of the universities, they will tell you they are an early Neanderthal people of this place. But others, they know better. Locals will tell you that the Urisks were a magical fairy folk. Short, hairy, club-footed, like brownies, boggarts, or Dundonians for that matter. But if a fairy or an Urisk is the worst you'd ever see at that spot, you'd be lucky indeed. A tale. Once upon a time, legend has it that Loch Katrine was not a loch at all, but a green and lush valley, the home to a thoughtful, kind people, farmers, tradesmen, woodworkers, who honoured their ancient gods and meant harm to none, offended none. Save, that is, for the great hairy goblin who dwelled in a lonely cave halfway up Benvenue, envious of the happiness, the tranquility enjoyed by his new human neighbours. He was thwarted many times over, for you see, these were a good, simple, humble folk. They had no gold or goods for the goblin to steal from them, nothing to tease and taunt them over. Their one possession of any worth was a well, a sacred spring, famed far and wide for its golden healing waters. And each night, as the sun would set over the valley, a maiden, only the pure could tend so precious a thing, would climb the crag to ensure that the stops on the sluices of the well were shuttered tight, that not one drop of that precious fluid should be lost. Then one summer's night, many, many centuries ago, as the sun set over the valley, as the shadow of the rocks loomed deep over the valley, a stranger came to call. A handsome devil he was. bright-eyed and bonny, just the kind to tempt an innocent young maiden's eye. And he offered her a handful of plump, ripe mountain berries. She couldn't resist. How could she? Such a tasty treat. As she bit deep into the first berry, it seemed more bitter than she had expected. She thought nothing of it, thought no harm, certainly, from her fine new friend. And when she bit deep into the second, her limbs began to grow weary. Her eyes darkened, her vision blurred, and the visage of her fine new friend seemed suddenly to shift and change. Not quite so pleasant, but harder, harsher, hairier too. His smile seemed not so pretty now, not so kind. She slept long and lonely hours, woken only by the first light of the dawning sun. And she was glad to see, and I am glad to say, that she was untouched. No harm had come to her. Her virtue was intact. But there was no sign of her fine new friend. The stranger was gone. And for a moment she laughed, sure in her heart this must have been some childish fancy, a daft daydream of a wee lassie. And when she looked to the side, she saw the stoppers on the sluices of the well had been opened wide. The water had drained away, every last drop, and she wept in that moment. Sure, she had been tricked. She wept as she ran down deep into the valley, there to confess her foolishness and to seek forgiveness from her friends and family. Oh, but my friends, the valley was gone. Her friends and family had drowned as the water of the well had washed their lives away in the night as they slept. The birds were silent, as though they too had been stunned by the horror of it all. Only one sound could be heard, a distant laughter that seemed to come from a lonely cave halfway up Benvenue. And as she listened, the wee lassie was sure almost for a moment that it sounded like her fine new gentleman friend, her caller, the stranger. And as the laughter grew harsher, harder, crueler, she knew that she was right. Slowly, her heart broken, sure now that the goblin had tricked her, she ascended Benvenue and cast herself from those lonely spots deep down into the waters below. The waters that now bear her name, Katrine. Some in that place claim that the cackles, the calls heard over the loch at sunset are those of eagles or other wayward wildfowl. But my friends, others know better. They know them to be the cruel laughter of the oldest resident of that ancient valley, still lurking in his hateful howff to this very day.